In other news, Lebanon is on the brink of collapse, and the whole region is feeling it. In fact, with no working government, poverty spreading rapidly, and Iran trying constantly to take control, the fear of disruptive change can be practically cut with a knife.
בעניין לבנון, מדינת לבנון נמצאת על סף קריסה, כמו כל המדינות שאיראן משתלטת עליהן, והפעם אזרחי לבנון משלמים את המחיר. צריך להבין, אזרחי לבנון משלמים מחיר כבד בגלל ההשתלטות של איראן על המדינה. אנחנו עוקבים שם מקרוב אחרי המצב, גם שר הביטחון, שר החוץ ואנחנו נמשיך להיות דרוכים.
So is Lebanon about to lose control? How did the country fall to this level? And why can't the country pick itself up? Here with analysis is ILTV's Asaf Nissan. Asaf, it's great to have you back. So first of all, maybe just break down the situation. How bad is it on the ground in Lebanon, and what has the Lebanese government or the Lebanese public tried to do to address these issues?
So we're talking about a whole meltdown catastrophe. We're talking about poverty stricken in the streets. Over 35% of the country is living in the streets. Over 93% rise in murders in the past 2 years, ever since 2019, a 93 rate rise. And of course, we can't forget the explosion. We can't forget the problems that happened. And of course,
last year.
Exactly. With all that coming in hand, and the fact that there's no stable government on the table, there's nothing to do. The government, the country itself is on its way to a total breakdown.
Why has the government? I mean, speaking from Israel, it's funny to sit on this high horse, so to speak. But why is the government failing to come together?
It's not far off than the same problem we had here in Israel, coalition. The problem is none of the parties are willing to sit with each other. And when we're talking about the parties, we're not talking about Likud or Yamina. We're talking about literal factions such as the Maronites, the Shiites, the Sunni, all the different parties in Lebanon that represent the whole different sect. They can come together and sit together. That's why also you see that there's no real relief effort. Each faction wants to take ownership and wants to take credit for the whole success.
All right, now I know you mentioned just now the explosion in the Beirut port in the summer of 2000. I understand that an investigation, or at least part of the investigation into that explosion, has now been blocked. Can you tell me about that?
So it's not exactly been blocked because they do know that the public was actually forsaken by the government, because officials did know there was a lot of ammonium nitrate sitting there in the port itself unhoused in a proper way for years. And that, of course, stemmed to the fact that when the explosion erupted, it didn't just erupt in the local Beirut area also, but in the entire region, and thus creating the damage we're still seeing up to now, over billions of dollars still missing and still hurt from property damage. But the problem is that they do know that the officials are responsible, and they also have the name of the General Security Agency head that was Ibrahim, that is one of the people in charge, and they did ask to remove his immunity, but the courts decided on Friday, and the Interior Ministry decided it will not comply to it, because in the end of the day, they protect their own, I would say, and also to see the fact that they do want to keep it on, let's say, a more diplomatic level.
So how much of that frustration has been expressed in the street? Because I know that, especially with respect to Hezbollah, public outcry and public criticism is not always acceptable.
I mean, for the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of protests on the street, twice in 2020, that were calling for resignations of the government. Of course, that led to the current crisis that they're in with no successful government. But in addition, you see it in the streets when now the victims themselves are calling out for justice, are calling out to the government that forsaken them, and they're driving in the middle of a fuel crisis, which actually affects the whole country to a point where literally you don't see any electricity for 22 hours. But in the middle of that crisis, you do see those people still driving, still calling out, still protesting, because if not now, then who and when?
I mean, in addition to that, it sounds like there's really, it's like you said, it's really, if not now, when? Because, I mean, we're seeing reports of people waiting 3 hours or more in line just to get gas for their car, people resorting to violence.
And those subsidies, by the way, speaking of gas, a lot of the gas and food has been subsidized by the central bank, but even they are running out of funds. And the central bank itself called it an international crisis. Like, I haven't seen one like that since 1850.
All right, so the whole world is watching very closely to see what's going on, especially within the region. Asaf Nissan, thank you so much for giving us some insights.
Thank you so much.